Hello again. In this video we're going to be covering scarfing two boards together that are of either different thicknesses or different widths, or possibly both different thicknesses and widths. This problem crops up quite a bit in boat building. For example, mill run is often not constant in the thickness, and we might want to extend a board to make it long enough for a strake. It's much better to scarf the boards together before we plane them to the required thickness. Another case is when, say, we're building a boat out of plywood and one of the planks tapers from, say, 1.5 feet in the center to 6 inches at the ends of the boat. It's a waste of plywood to scarf together two pieces of plywood that are 1.5 feet in width when we only need a smaller width at the ends. Why not scarf boards together that are of different thicknesses just to match the pattern? As a review, in the first video of this series, the generalized description of a scarf joint and its face was examined. It was pointed out that the scarf face could take on many shapes. In the second video, we created a feather scarf to join two boards of equal dimensions, or cross-sections. And we used a construction technique where one of the boards was placed on top of the other, so that during the formation of the scarf, we could assure that both surfaces had the same slope. Where both boards have the same dimensions, this results in both of the scarf faces being identical. What was not pointed out was that this technique does not and cannot be used to create any of the other possible scarf surfaces illustrated in video 1. Scarves like this, where the strike is not perpendicular to the board's edges. Well, why is that? As we can see here, in the general case, two scarf surfaces are not identical. In fact, they're exact mirror images of one another. So that if we place one of the on top of the other, you can see that the surfaces do not form a combined planar surface. The technique we use takes advantage of the fact that the mirror image of a rectangle is equal to itself. However, in the generalized surface, they still are planes and they do fit together. For example, these two. I can get them to fit together, but it forms a kink at the joint. And we can use this feature to actually intentionally create a warped board. We'll see that in the next video. Getting back on track, let's look at scarfing two boards with the same thickness but different widths. Actually, this is quite simple. It's similar to what we've done in the past. The one caveat being, of course, that we have a different width board. Set the larger one on the bottom. Decide on your slope angle, say 8 to 1, so it's going to be about here. Align your boards as before, and then we'll draw in our strike line. And our witness marks. And then we'll go ahead and put our rough scarf in on both boards. And then when we're ready to do our sanding, line it up as before. But now we have to decide on our final position of the smaller width board, so that when we actually put it in position to sand, it's going to be the final position when we actually glue the joint together. So, for example, if you wanted the final board to be here, then that's where you'd position the board for sanding. That way the scarf joint has the best chance of being a perfect match. Other than that, just proceed as in the previous videos. Scarfing boards of different thickness together is a bit more complicated, so let's walk through it. First, we'll take our thickest board and we'll mark off a strike line. We've got, this is say 1 1/4 inches. That's 10/8. And so say we want an 8-to-1 slope, so that'd be about 10 inches, somewhere in here. So we'll go ahead and put in a strike line there. And now let's tip it on edge, and we'll draw a line to represent the scarf edge. So that marks out the thick board. Next, take something with parallel edges. I'll use this yardstick and line up the edge of the yardstick with your scarf edge, having the yardstick on the good, not the waste. And then clamp it into position. So this is the feather of the thicker board, and we want to take the feather face of the thinner board, put them face to face. This is sort of backwards from what we did before. Get them positioned, and then we'll slide the thinner board until it comes at the point where the yardstick and the feather face of the thick board coincide. Make that, slide that, make sure that the ruler is still parallel with the feather edge that you drew before. That looks pretty good right there. Then we'll mark that off. And then that becomes the location of the strike line there. Now we can take it apart. We'll just tip this over now and mark the strike. And let's put in a couple extras so when we're roughing it out we don't lose it. And we'll make sure we have our witness mark here. And we can do the same on the thick one. We'll put in a couple extra strike lines. This method basically takes all the math out of it. Now what we'll go ahead and do is proceed to rough cut both of these scarves in. I'll do that off camera to save time. I've roughed out the scarves and I've clamped the boards in position as we did previously. I have the thicker board on the bottom and the thin board at the top, and the feather of the top one is lined up with the strike line of the lower one. Now I'll go ahead and sand the surface to its finished position. Well, I finished the scarf surfaces now and they came out pretty good. I've marked out the actual measurements. The thick board, the actual scarf face, ended up to being 9 5/8 inches in length. And on the thin board, it ended up being 8 3/8 inches. And on the thicker one now, I've marked off what 8 3/8 inches comes to. And so when this joint goes together in the gluing process, you'll see that the thick board, part of its scarf, is not used. But that all will be removed when the board gets planed down to the final thickness. And finally, let's take a look at the actual gluing process. Again, we'll line up our baseboard along its edge and clamp it in place with the plastic locator so that we don't glue it down to our 2x6. Now a problem occurs. We have choices on where we actually glue the scarves together. If, for example, our thick board has really bad rough edges and we want to plane both sides off, then maybe we want to set our scarf so that there's a little waste on both sides. Or maybe we want to go all the way up here. All we have to do to solve that is on our thin board put the appropriate shims in place so that the scarf faces are set where they should be. Whatever position we decide on, chances are we got another issue is that the top of the smaller, thinner board is not in the same plane as the thicker one. So when we put our clamping board in position, we can't overlap. It would put unequal pressure on our joint. So what we want to do is put our clamping board only on the top, thinner scarf face, and in the pressure, when the pressure is applied from the clamps, there's going to be a much greater tendency for the scarf to slip. So in this case, where we're clamping boards of different thicknesses together, we've got to make sure that before we apply this pressure, we have the boards secured to our 2x6 so that this lateral movement doesn't happen. In review, in the last two videos, we've looked at making scarves where we can scarf two boards together, make a longer one that's straight and true. And we used a technique where we laid one board on top of the other, which would guarantee the dip of both scarves is identical. We did this in plywood and in wood and in boards of different thicknesses and different widths. The next video, we're going to look at creating the scarf where we intentionally want there to be a kink at the scarf location. We'll see you then.